Hello and welcome. Today we've got Floyd Brown, who's now the chairman of Kari Lake's campaign, which I'm very proud and honored to interview Floyd Brown for that. And today we're going to be discussing if America falls, the whole world falls. And this is why the whole world needs to be paying attention to the United States. We need to get involved because it starts there. Now, just before we begin, you can subscribe to my Instagram channel at nicholas.veniamin, where you can follow all my daily newsreels. Floyd Brown, thank you so much for joining me. How are you and what have you been up to?
Oh, Nicholas, it's always great to be with you. And I have been as busy as ever, as I know you have. But you're right. It is a real challenge. Kari Lake announced that she's running for Senate in October. And since then, it has been, just all out. I've been involved in campaigns for over 40 years, having started as a young man in my 20s, working for Ronald Reagan, and then working for Bob Dole and working with Mike Huckabee and a lot of other candidates in those years in between. But this is a real challenge. It's going to be probably the most competitive race for the U.S. Senate in America in this next election, 2024. And I believe it is really the second most important election after the election for president of the United States. So, we're going to choose a president in the United States, and then we are going to, decide whether or not the Senate is going to stay in the hands of Chuck Schumer and the Democrats, or whether or not we're going to put it in the hands of the Republicans so that we can actually get some things done with a unified government. Because right now, it's very difficult to do anything when the American government is fragmented and you have a Republican House of Representatives and a Democrat president and a Democrat Senate. So we are literally not making the big and important and necessary decisions that need to be made to right the ship and put America back on track to make America first.
Absolutely. It's very important that we take control of the Senate, the House, and also, because we want that to work, in conjunction with the presidency.
Yeah, because it requires us to take all three in order to do things such as fix the border. Right now, the American border is being assaulted with an invasion of people from all over the globe. We don't even know who they are. For all we know, they could be, Hamas terrorists. They could be former members of ISIS out of Syria. They could be Venezuelan terrorists. They could be, Chinese communist infiltrators. We don't know who's coming across our border, but we do know one thing: literally tens of thousands of people are crossing every week, and we have no idea who they are. We're not tracking them, and we're losing them into America. We call them, gotaways or getaways, and it's a very serious issue, especially for those of us that are in Arizona, where Kari Lake is running and where I call home. So it is a very difficult time in the United States, and we have to have a unified government, and that could only come in 2024. So it's very important that Donald Trump be elected president and that Kari Lake and other Republicans capture the U.S. Senate, and we take back the U.S. government, because the last 4 years have been just an absolute disaster. Whether it's, skyrocketing inflation, we have a troubled economy, we have so many different things that are broken and not working in the United States that just are crying out for solutions. And the only way we're going to fix it is if we get back to governing the country on a America First path.
Absolutely. Now, when Donald Trump was president, he had everyone, the Democrats, blocking everything he was doing. And I understand that, not only did he bring the United States up to a historic level, but imagine, I just think to myself, imagine what the country would be like if we had the Senate, we had the House of Representatives and Congress, and everything was, everybody was working together in making America great. Where do you think, how do you think?
So,
Yeah,
and
please.
this is important for the entire world, and this is what I want to really drill into, Nicholas, is that when America is ailing and America has problems, the whole world has problems. I mean, right now, let's be honest. I mean, we have a war raging in Ukraine where hundreds of thousands of people have died really needlessly. We have, a temporary ceasefire in the Middle East between Hamas and Israel, but that is a tinderbox which could reignite at any moment in time. We have the possibility of Iran closing the Straits of Hormuz or attacking American troops in Iraq and also in other places in the Middle East. So, we are in a precarious situation. And this is a result of the Biden foreign policy weakness. We've emboldened countries like Iran. We've emboldened countries like China, who's been giving us all kinds of problems in the Far East. And the friends of America are the friends of America are on the defensive. And so this is, I think, part of an attempt to bring America down so that we will turn and accept globalism. And globalism, I guarantee you, Nicholas, is not the solution. Globalism will be an even worse problem because the farther you remove government from the people, the farther it gets, then the less likely that government and the decisions made by that government are going to be influenced by the needs and the desires of the population. And so, America, I like to say, the best decisions for Arizona are made right here in Phoenix. And they're not made in Washington, D.C. But can you imagine if the world government is in Geneva and we can't even appeal to Washington, D.C., but we've got to appeal to, some, massive globalist government based in Geneva? It will make it more difficult for all of us. America has been a bulwark for freedom and the protector of freedom around the globe. And if America falls, I believe the planet becomes, in essence, almost a prison planet, because all of the lockdowns that they so effectively did during COVID, the technology now exists for the globalists to basically impact every area of our lives, to control what we can buy and sell through the central bank digital currencies that they want to roll out, where we can go, because they want to actually now put in our automobiles the technology to shut our automobiles down. And if we don't go where we're supposed to go, to just not let us go. The whole idea of Americans as free agents is under assault. Our medical care, we don't get to make the decisions about our own medical care. Now it's made by our health insurance companies in league and working together with government and the CDC and the WHO. And the farther these decisions get from the people, the less happy the people are about those decisions. So we're getting poorer, we're having more difficulty. And so I think the only solution is to go back to those America First policies. We all know how well the economy was working when Donald Trump was president. Even at the end of COVID, the economy was skyrocketing until these Biden policies were put into place. And since then, the economy has just barely been muddling along. And people have actually been made poorer because their wages aren't keeping up with inflation. So when they sat down here in the United States for turkey dinner on Thanksgiving, it was 30% more, a full third more than it cost just a few years ago under Donald Trump. And if this trend and these trends continue, it's going to be, very, very difficult for all Americans.
Absolutely. It's absolutely terrible. We're hearing this, every day. But we need to think of solutions, And I want to ask you, what's your advice to we the people who are watching this right now? What do we need to be doing?
Well, first and foremost, you need to get to know your neighbors, and then you need to activate with them to find candidates in your local area that have these America First ideas. And then we all need to get involved in the system, because the system in America is still able to be influenced by the citizenry. And it's so important that we have citizens who, go and volunteer to become poll watchers in 2024, and volunteer like I'm doing on the Kerry Lake campaign, to volunteer, whether it's on a campaign for city council, county council, local sheriff, United States Senate, or on the Trump campaign. These different campaigns need volunteers in order to be successful. They also need funders. I mean, even if you give $5, $10, $15, $25, if we all come together and give even small amounts, it can be a huge impact on the political process. So everybody needs to vote. Everybody needs to be engaged. Everybody needs to be more active, Nicholas, than they've ever been in their entire life, because this is the most important election, I believe, in world history. And I believe that the world is successful when America's successful. And when America's successful, we will stop the globalists that have been itching to put this world under complete and total domination.
Now, the globalists have enslaved the United States and then, the whole world through going to wars and getting all the countries to accept their dollar. Once we get rid of the globalists, which I really do believe we will, what would happen to the Federal Reserve? What would replace it? What would we have? How would it work?
Well, there's a lot of things that could replace the fiat dollar. And one is what America had for many, many years, and that is a global currency, or a U.S. currency, because I don't like global currencies, but a U.S. currency that's based on gold and silver. But as other countries also adopt their local currency to be based on gold and silver, then you have a price stability that comes into play, where all of the currencies are locked into that gold and silver price, which is a real commodity. It's a real something that's held its value for 5,000 years, and potentially we would even see at that point the currencies appreciate in value. So I think that's really the best solution, is for the U.S. just to abolish the Federal Reserve and have the Treasury link the dollar to the gold that we have in Fort Knox. Now, whether or not we can do that, at the current price of gold, probably not. But there would be a price of gold that we could, in fact, link the dollar to. And then we would, from that point on, have an incredibly stable currency. And when you have stability, this is what people need to understand. There are two things that have to come together in order to have successful economies. One is the rule of law, meaning everybody's treated the same by the law. And so we have predictability, so people can make long-term financial decisions because of that predictability. It's when the laws are always changing and when the currency is up in the air in terms of its valuation, it makes it very difficult for people to make long-term determinations. But if you have a stable currency and you have the rule of law and you have property rights, you put those three things together, and I guarantee you your economy is going to rocket. And this is not some unproven theory, Nicholas. This is what we know from history. And we're forgetting our history. We're walking away from our history. America has been incredibly successful. And all we have to do is go back to those time-honored and really history-honored ideas that have been so successful, and we will see that success replicated again. And that's part of why I think a Donald Trump presidency would be so effective, because we saw how the economy operated, even with the assault of COVID. The Trump economy was one of the best we've ever had. So we need to go back to these Trump policies. And then from there, we have predictability, we have stability, and we have people able to make long-term decisions because of that predictability and stability.
Absolutely. Now, let's assume that Kari Lake gets in, Donald Trump wins presidency, and all goes to plan. Now, how far away do you think we are from seeing the Federal Reserve being abolished?
Well, I don't know that we would have the Federal Reserve abolished right away. But what we wouldn't have is what the Federal Reserve and the different central banks have been pushing us towards, and that is a central bank digital currency. And what they're trying to do, and they haven't been able to do this yet because we've been resisting it, is digitize our currency so that they can control every single transaction and they can control what we buy and sell. See, because with a central bank digital currency that is completely centralized, and so that every single transaction goes through the Federal Reserve, they can decide, hey, each person can have, quote, X amount of meat each month. And each person can have X amount of vegetables. And each person, we used to have houses of 3,000 square feet. Well, we don't think people deserve a house that's any greater than 1,000 square feet. And they can start to mandate things using that digital currency that currently it's impossible for them to mandate because they can't control all of these transactions. To centralize the economy like that is a real threat. The Federal Reserve has been testing the central bank digital currency. A number of different central banks around the globe, China's, the European Central Bank, they've all been testing these central bank digital currencies. But what we want to do is stop their implementation. Now, the Federal Reserve, I think it would be great to make the long-term decision to get rid of the Federal Reserve because it's controlled by the elites. It's not run for the people. It's not part of the government. And they basically have bailed out bankers and other people that I don't think deserve bailed out. The people are the ones that should control their destiny, not the elites. And that's when we'll have real democracy and equality, is when the people are in control and they can vote with their dollars. And that's what we had during the Trump economy. And I'd like to go back to it.
Absolutely. I'd love to go back to it. I love his policies. Now, I want to ask you a very controversial question about the Federal Reserve, considering that they print money and that they can create money from thin air. It's not backed by silver and gold. Would you agree that the whole banking system is run illegally and illegitimately?
Well, it's run for the benefit of the elites that control it. That's very clear. We saw that in 2008 when they bailed out all the bankers and kept literally a number of banks that they started calling too big to fail. And so what they were doing is not holding those managements of those banks responsible for their bad decisions. So first of all, I think they've allowed banks to get too big. I like the idea of smaller local banks. I think it'd be great if the United States broke up Bank of America and broke up JP Morgan Chase and broke up Wells Fargo and made these banks smaller, more local, more regionalized, like they used to be in the United States. They allowed them to get way too big. And that was a change in government policy that happened during my lifetime. And so these massive banks, the bigger they are, the more risk they create for the entire economy. So they got so big that they said they were, quote, too big to fail. So then the managers, the presidents, the vice presidents, the chairman of the boards, the directors of these banks were not held responsible when they made bad financial decisions during the years prior to the great economic collapse of 2008. And so they were not held responsible as they should have been. The way to keep the economy free is to hold shareholders of banks that make bad decisions responsible by allowing those banks to go out of business. And we didn't do that. 2008, all of these bad banks, whether it was Washington Mutual or even or Countrywide, we had a number of these banks. They ended up being merged into these mega banks, making them even bigger, making them, quote, too big to fail. So Bank of America and Merrill Lynch are all part of the same cabal. These institutions are way too big. And so I'm a strong believer in having smaller banks, more regional banks, so the risk doesn't get out of control and so that no bank is ever too big to fail.
So do you think that the banks are being worked for the globalists, but in a legitimate way? Or
no. So I talk about this extensively in my book, Counterpunch. And that is the U.S. government, and many governments around the world for that matter, have been run for the elites, but really for the profit of the elites. And that's what has to change. The first time, you remember when I was a young child, Dwight Eisenhower came forward and he gave his last speech. In his last speech, he said, we've got to watch the military-industrial complex because it's getting too big and becoming too profitable, and war is becoming a profit center. And since that time, Nicholas, the United States has never won a war. In my lifetime, we haven't won a war. And the reason is because what happened is we got a shift. And that shift was we go and have wars for 20 years in the case of Afghanistan, a decade plus in the case of Iraq. And so wars are no longer about getting there, winning the war, coming home. They're about how many years can you grind out and use the most bullets, use the most artillery, use the most drones, use the most aircraft, use the most munitions so that the military-industrial complex can make the most amount of money. So that was the first one of these industries that was captured by government and became symbiotic with government. And this hurts democracy. And so these military-industrial complex owners, these big, huge companies, Raytheon, Lockheed Martin, are mammoth, and they pour literally millions of Boeing's another one. They pour millions and millions and millions of dollars into campaigns so that they can keep their budgets up, because that money is coming straight out of the federal coffers, not even from the people, except through, forced taxation. Another example is what happened in COVID. So, it's interesting, but none of us in the U.S. paid for the jab. Instead, it was all paid for by the government. And so you had these policies. We had two different drugs, ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine, which together with zinc and antibiotics were proven to really work great against COVID. Mm-hmm. But we suppressed those therapeutics, some of which cost less than $1 a pill, so that we could give people a very expensive jab. That jab, Nicholas, made over 40 brand new minted billionaires. And so you have companies like Pfizer and Moderna that are pouring literally millions of dollars into political campaign contributions, because that money for that jab, it didn't come from the consumer, it came from the government. Everybody got it free. And so to me, we have got to get private business out of the government's pocket. Hospitals are that way. Since Obamacare has passed, the hospitals are deep in the government's pocket. And so the government is now controlling the policy in those hospitals. If America is going to work, we have to get big business out of the pocket of the government.
Absolutely. Do you think we will see any justice?
I pray that we will, but I guarantee you, if Joe Biden is reelected, we will never see any justice.
Absolutely. Well, it's very interesting, because when you say that, they make all this money from an emergency with the COVID, and it was free. Billions. But then people with diabetes and other illnesses, you've got to go and pay for them. Hello, are you with me?
So it's beyond. Policies are being run for the benefits of the elites, and that's what people need to understand. So in 2008, when the banks had a problem, well, they took billions of dollars of taxpayer money and they put it into the banks. So you had tons of private benefit. It means that the billionaires who had made all of the profits on these risky bets in the banks, they kept the dough. And then when it came time for the piper to be paid, the taxpayers were the ones that were put on the hook. So the key reform that has to be made is we have to get government and private enterprise. We have to keep them from making these symbiotic relationships where private business is generating billions of dollars based on government policy.
Absolutely. And this is why America first, because we need to put all our attention on America, but otherwise the whole world will fall. So we have to absolutely get involved from a local level. Floyd Brown, it's been an absolute honor to have you. Thank you so much for sharing all your views with us today. Is there anything else that you'd like to say to the viewers before we finish?
Yes. If you haven't gotten my book, Counterpunch, yet, Counterpunch, How an Unlikely Alliance of America, Our Country for Faith and Freedom, then make sure you go out and get it today. It's a perfect Christmas gift. I guarantee a family member that you argued with at Thanksgiving, well, here's a book you can give them to really educate them about how we can fix the globe through taking back our government with good policy.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much, Floyd Brown, and we'll speak again very soon. You take care and God bless you. Bye-bye.
Always great to be with you.